Imagine a place where even the sound of your breath had to be silenced, where a single glance or a single spoken word could decide your fate forever. This was no myth, no fairy tale. This was the reality of the Ottoman harem. Behind golden doors, the most beautiful and powerful women were bound not by chains of iron, but by rules so strange, so unspoken, that no one dared write them down. And the most haunting truth: these rules remained hidden for centuries, until now. The Ottoman palace was not just a fortress of power, it was a labyrinth of secrets, and none were more closely guarded than those of the harem chambers. To the outside world, the harem was a dream: silk cushions, golden goblets, endless feasts, and the attention of the Sultan himself. But for those who stepped through its tall, carved doors, the truth was very different. Inside, life was ruled by laws that could break not just bodies, but souls. The young women who entered, taken from distant lands, gifted to the court, or chosen for their beauty, were not welcomed with jewels or gowns. On their very first night, they were handed a delicate silk scroll. Written upon it were the chamber rules, and those rules were unlike anything they had ever seen before. The first rule read, "Walk as shadows, never as storms." This meant that after dusk, no footsteps could echo on the cold marble floors. Even if exhausted or restless, they had to move in absolute silence. One wrong sound could bring severe punishment. Many swore that the palace itself seemed alive, listening, waiting to betray anyone who broke the rule. The second rule was even more unsettling. The Sultan's gaze is a gift, never a right. No woman could look directly into the Sultan's eyes unless summoned. Eye contact itself became a dangerous act. By controlling something as simple as a glance, the Sultan's presence became almost divine, untouchable, unreachable. Some women admitted this was the hardest law to obey. Their instincts, their curiosity, their very humanity longed to look, but one wrong glance could seal their fate. Another commandment declared, "The veil is the boundary between respect and disgrace." Every woman was required to cover her hair outside her private chamber. The veils, embroidered with golden thread, appeared like ornaments, but they were restrictions. To be seen uncovered was a sign of arrogance or rebellion, and in the harem, such a mistake could mean banishment from the Sultan's gatherings forever. And then came the most suffocating law of all: the chamber belongs to silence, not to speech. In the Sultan's presence, words were to be measured, voices lowered, opinions hidden. The harem was filled with secrets, but the women themselves were forbidden to speak them aloud. Even laughter, even whispers, could vanish into silence the moment a matron appeared, reminding everyone of the invisible lines they could not cross. For many newcomers, these rules transformed them almost overnight. They arrived as dreamers, girls who laughed, who spoke freely, who carried their hopes like treasures. But within days, they were forced to move like shadows, their voices muted, their identities stripped away. It was as though the palace swallowed them whole, rewriting who they were. And yet one question haunted them all. Why? Why did these rules exist? Were they meant to guard the Sultan's privacy? To create fear? To keep the women divided, too cautious to form alliances that might challenge his throne? No one truly knew. Perhaps that was the most terrifying part. Some whispered that it was all a test of loyalty. Others believed the Sultan himself needed mystery to maintain power, to remain not a man, but an untouchable figure of legend. A few even claimed the rules were weapons, designed to crush spirits, to bend even the strongest women into silence. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear: inside the harem, rules were destiny. And destiny belonged not to the women, but to the Sultan alone, and this was only the beginning. The first glimpse into the forbidden chamber, for behind those velvet curtains lay more than beauty and luxury. There were tests, sacrifices, and unspoken laws that shaped the fate of every woman who entered. If the written rules of the harem seemed strange, what followed was even more unsettling. Before any woman could enter the Sultan's private gatherings, she had to endure a series of secret tests, rituals that were never explained, once strictly observed. One of the first was the rosewater ritual. At precise hours of the evening, the women were led to marble baths filled with perfumed water. They were ordered to bathe in silence, every movement observed by stern matrons. The reason was never revealed, but whispers spread. The fragrance was less about beauty and more about obedience, a test to see who could endure routine, who could submit without question. Another trial came in the form of the barefoot walk. On cold marble floors, the women were made to move slowly, gracefully, as if gliding across ice. A single misstep, a sound too sharp, or a stumble was considered failure. Some believed it was a lesson in composure, that a woman's strength was not measured in charm, but in her ability to hide discomfort and walk with unshaken dignity. Then came the strangest of all, the candle test. The women were instructed to sleep beneath the dim glow of a candle that burned throughout the night. The flame cast uneasy shadows across their chambers, flickering on the walls, stealing their rest. It was a cruel game of endurance. Those who complained, those who failed to stay calm under the restless light, were quietly removed from the Sultan's sight forever. These rituals were never written in books, never declared in public. They existed only in hushed voices, passed down from woman to woman like a forbidden memory. And yet every newcomer soon realized the truth. Inside the harem, beauty alone was never enough. It was silence, patience, an unshakable discipline that decided who remained and who was cast out. And while outsiders dreamed of the harem as a paradise of pleasure, the women inside knew the secret. It was not a place of comfort, but of constant examination. A life lived under tests where even the smallest weakness could erase you from history. Imagine reaching the very edge of your fate, a place where silence weighs more than words, and where every breath can decide your future. This was the unspoken reality inside the hidden walls of the Ottoman harem, an institution that the outside world only saw as luxury, but inside was a battlefield of discipline, patience, and survival. The women who survived the earlier trials were far from safe. In truth, what awaited them was even more demanding. The final step of this strange system was not written in any book, nor revealed in any official records. It lived in whispers, in the anxious glances exchanged between the women, and in the careful instructions of the matrons who had once walked the same path themselves. First came the test of silence. For 3 nights they were required to stay in their chambers without uttering a single word. Every sound carried weight. A sigh, a restless movement, even the faintest cry in sleep could bring suspicion. Matrons passed by quietly, listening. The silence was not only external, it was a test of inner control, forcing the women to command their own thoughts. Only those who learned to silence the storms within themselves could prove worthy of advancing further. Then came the test of presence. In the grand audience hall, richly decorated with velvet drapes and golden chandeliers, the women were presented not to the Sultan, but to the elders of the court, who judged their discipline. Here beauty mattered less than composure. Trembling hand, a darting eye, a faltering voice, these small cracks could destroy everything. The women stood motionless, their posture refined, their expressions balanced between humility and dignity. It was not about speaking, it was about communicating. Strength without words. But the most haunting trial of all was the night of reflection. Each woman was left alone with only a mirror, a candle, and her own thoughts. This ritual was designed not to test their appearance, but their ability to confront themselves. Could they face the shadows of fear, doubt, and longing without breaking? Some whispered that this was the most dangerous moment of all, because the real enemy was not the matrons, nor the rules, but the battle within their own hearts. Many emerged from that chamber with a new fire in their eyes. Others came out broken, their futures quietly sealed. The whispers among the women often told stories of those who failed not through weakness of beauty or strength, but through the inability to control the mind. In the silence of those halls, it became clear. The harem was less about pleasure and more about power. It was about shaping loyalty, discipline, and unshakable self-mastery. And then, finally came the moment of selection. The surviving women, now few in number, were brought together in the inner court. Lanterns glowed softly, casting golden halos across their faces. Every woman looked serene, but beneath that calmness ran a storm of emotions. Fear, pride, uncertainty. The matrons moved among them like shadows, whispering quiet judgments, marking those who would remain and those who would quietly disappear from the palace walls. It was never loud, never dramatic. There were no announcements, no grand ceremonies. Fate in the harem was decided in silence, with a gesture, a nod, or sometimes nothing more than a look. The chosen ones stepped forward, their expressions frozen in composure, though their hearts thundered inside their chests. The others simply faded into the background, swallowed by the silence of history. Yet, what makes this story so haunting is not just the trials themselves, but what they reveal about human nature. Power is not only won on battlefields or in palaces, it is also shaped in quiet chambers and whispered rules, in silent sacrifices that the world outside will never see. For the women of the Ottoman harem, survival was never about beauty alone. It was about patience in the face of fear, discipline stronger than desire, and silence louder than any voice. These were the strange, unwritten bedroom rules of an empire that shaped destinies in shadows. Perhaps that is why history rarely speaks of them openly, because the most powerful stories are the ones whispered, not shouted. And sometimes silence itself is the loudest truth.